Hey, it's Jess here. If you've been a fan of the vulnerable, challenging, and spicy taboo episodes on Oh Really podcast, you can join my Patreon community. This gives you access to exclusive episodes, behind the scenes footage, and you're supporting me as a creator. Links are in the show notes. Your support means the world to me. Enjoy this all access episode. Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Oh Really podcast. My name is Jess, and I'm your host today. And if you haven't listened before, you're going to understand now that I absolutely love talking about taboo topics, all the taboo topics of the world. And I split them into three categories. I do vulnerable, challenging, and spicy. And today's topic, 100% covers all three, especially the spicy side. But it's predominantly in the vulnerable side of things. And this is actually one of the most vulnerable chats ever because it's something that personally impacts me so much and has impacted me. But I've come out of it so strong, so powerful, just like fucking unbreakable now. And you obviously know what we're talking about because you've clicked on this episode, and we're talking about herpes, both strains, HSV1 and HSV2. And we're going to do today's episode on a guy's perspective. And I have a pretty amazing guy that I've known for a few years now who has come on the podcast today. And I'm just, you will know when the episode, continues why my heart is so full and why he, it means so much that he's joining me today because it's a really powerful and impactful story. So firstly, let's welcome Lochee to the podcast. Welcome, Lochee.
Hey guys. Wow, that's such a lovely introduction. So good to be here with you, Jess, even for the first time. So good to have this chat in person, considering how many times we've had this chat.
We started talking a few years ago, and as you mentioned, we actually haven't met before. Face to face, we've never ever met. We've met on video before recently, but we predominantly have had our friendship over texting and voice messages years and years ago. I would love for you, because I actually am so curious about this as well, because it was such a long time ago. I would love for you to backtrack the story of how we started talking and kind of what led, that whole connection. Because, we have such a connection because we both have this vulnerability that we share, and that's how we connected in the first place. Run through the story of how did we meet technically?
Yeah, so the story is kind of cool. Jess is just an awesome person who loves responding with DMs, regardless of who it is. And I had my herpes diagnosis in about April, May-ish of 2022. And it was a bit after that where I started dating again, going out. But I was really, really nervous about the first time going out. And I was reading lots of stuff about herpes and looking up podcasts I could listen to, and actually stumbled upon Jess's last podcast, Keeping Up Your Gin, which was really cool. She had a really vulnerable episode on herpes where you just really just poured out your heart, and you were just so vulnerable. And I was just wow, I am freaking out about this. And here's someone who's so confident in themselves despite this. And I'm like, why can't I be like that too? And the best part about it is I was hey, I just messaged you. I just had a few questions about dating and how you navigate it and all these things. And you were just so happy to answer. You gave me such good answers, so detailed. And I was hell yeah, this is a person I actually want to be friends with beyond this. You were just so natural, so easy to talk to. And we've just continued that conversation ever since. A lot of firsts in that realm, coming after that, I've just updated you on first dates post-diagnosis, first sexual experiences diagnosis, how I've encountered a few. And you've just been so cool to chat with about that.
It is honestly a game changer of how you accept the diagnosis as well. When you can have someone just to talk to, and having somebody who actually has it means so much. And I get a lot of value from that from, other people. So that's why I did that episode, as fucking scary as that was. I look back and I think to myself, fuck, if I never did that episode, I've spoken to so many people since that episode, but you in particular, I think to myself, if Lochee never listened to that episode and connected with me and had that person to talk to, you right now, and people will know by the end of this episode that you're in such a good space, mentally, you just, you're exactly where I am right now, honestly. You're in a really good mindset. really good frame of mind when it comes to your diagnosis and like your direction and dating and all that crap. And I think to myself, fuck yeah, I'm so glad I did this. And, you know, talking recently and then you know, willing to come onto this podcast and talk about it, I was like just so happy and proud because you were in such a different mindset back in 2022.
Absolutely. And I thank you so much for that, because it's just practice getting that confidence. And like it started with that, like you planted that seed of like, hey, look, it's a completely normal thing that's just stigmatized. And here's what I think. And you gave me all this great advice for navigating the dating world and just being confident in myself. And I've just come leaps and bounds. And like even recently, I've just been like so much better with like just being open with girls I see, like dating wise. I've understood how to make the conversation so much better. But it's just a thing that takes time, and understanding that in yourself and building that confidence. But yeah, it started with that conversation with you, and we're still friends now.
Yeah, I know. And this is why my heart is so full. I'm like, oh, this is such a special episode. I do truly believe that being vulnerable, like it's such a strength. It can be such a superpower in life, being vulnerable, because, you know, people that are listening to this episode, you know, either they have herpes, maybe it's new, maybe it's, you know, been a few years, or maybe they're dating someone with herpes and they don't quite understand it. You know, that's the reason we're putting this out there, right? But everyone has a vulnerability of some sort, whether it's herpes, whether it's a bazillion other things. Everyone has that, and just like keep that in your mind, everybody listening, that everyone has a vulnerability. Trust me. Trust me.
Everyone's got something. It's an insecurity that you just need to deal with, and it's one of many. It could be anything, but so many people on this planet share this, and it's so nice to be able to be vulnerable about it, considering how much it's stigmatized.
Absolutely. So we're going to get into this episode now, and we're going to talk about, you know, right now you're in a good, you know, mindset, good frame of mind, but back then not so much. So we're going to bring it back to the old Lochee, and talk about, you know, your emotions and all that jazz of when you first got diagnosed. So you got diagnosed. Did you have symptoms? You know, what actually prompted you to go to the doctors? And had you actually ever heard of herpes before? Or like, did you have an understanding of anything about it? Take it away.
I think just like most people, herpes in my mind was just very stigmatized as a thing. Like, oh, I don't like sleep around. I'm not the person who goes like on every night out to hook up with a new person. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Like, totally respect that sort of stuff. But in my mind, it was like a very promiscuous, like only certain types of people could get herpes and I didn't think, especially that I was a person who could get it. And then I found out, I actually went down on a girl and she got symptoms of genital herpes. And she called me up saying, hey, I've got herpes. Have you been cheating on me? And I was just like, I would never. Like that broke my heart a little bit. And I was like, oh shit. So then I went to the doctor and I got tested. And I found out I had HSV1. So where I get, I thought in the past maybe I'd had like a pimple around my lip, but mostly I've been asymptomatic my entire life. So I really had no way of knowing. I even did standard STI checks, and with that partner I was with at the time, she asked me, have you had an STI test? And I said, yeah, absolutely. Like I definitely have had an STI test, and I thought it was all covered, and I disclosed everything I needed to. And then we still ran into it where I potentially like gave her HSV1 and it transmitted in the genital form for her, and I've continued to live pretty asymptomatically.
Yeah. It's such a shock, hey, when you kind of get told that. And of course she's going to think you're cheating, right? Because it's like a new STD. But, you know, we were discussing this recently, and so many people aren't aware of this, is that when you have an STD check at the doctor's surgery, it's not a routine check. You actually have to ask and request for that to be added. And unless you've been with someone with herpes, or unless you have an ulcer, or you have some kind of symptomatic reason to get a herpes thing added to the test, a doctor just won't do it. Like they won't, because it's expensive and it's just unnecessary. They're like, why the fuck would we need to do that when everyone's got some strain of herpes? There's no point.
Exactly. So the doctor's actually like, my doctor discouraged me at first. Like she was like, hey, why do you want to do this? And I explained my reason. She's like, okay, that's pretty valid. Let's go ahead and do it. But they said for the most part they try and avoid doing like herpes testing because, yeah, like you said, it's expensive. And number two, so many people have it. It does more damage to your mental health for most people than it does good. Like, you have to think so much more about future sexual experiences and encounters, the way you handle dating. And doctors just think, well, we're going to try and avoid that for the most part and test for other things that might be more like life threatening, I guess.
Yeah. And that's the thing is like other STDs, you know, such as chlamydia, gonorrhea, like syphilis, all of them actually lead to, you know, medical issues with the body, like women's fertility. You know, you actually get infections which, you know, affect your health, where herpes is a very, very, very different, very complicated virus, because it's actually a virus as well, which is why you have it forever. And that's what people don't really understand is like you can't just take a magic pill and it's gone. When I got diagnosed, I was like, fuck, I wish this was chlamydia. Like I actually was like genuinely, I'd never had an STD in my life. And I was like, I wish this was just chlamydia or something, because everyone has a little laugh when they get the clap and they're like, I'll just take my couple of pills and I'm sweet. And it's all fun for them. But then it's like when you get something for life, you're like, well, what now?
And as a guy, I feel the exact same way. And I hope all the other guys out there listening, like, understand that. Like, I was like, shit, I wish it could have been anything else at the time. I was like, as long as it was curable, I wouldn't have cared. But just to know, like, when I found out it was incurable and a thing that I had to live with, I was like, it scared the shit out of me. And I actually, when I first got the news, I was like, I'm never going to be able to date again. Like, I'm going to have to be celibate for the rest of my life, which is just such a silly, it's just not a reality that I actually have to face. It's so backwards, and the stigma around it is just so, it just annoys me every time.
It annoys me every time too. But let's talk about that emotion, I guess, that you feel when you get the diagnosis, because it's a very strange emotion to feel when you look at the future of your life. You know, whatever age you get diagnosed, if you're in your teens, if you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, fucking 60s, you think about the future and you think, I'm never going to be able to have like a nice, fun, fulfilling sex life ever again. And if you're single with this diagnosis, you think, no one's going to date me. Like, oh my God, like, how am I ever going to date? How am I going to get into a relationship? Like, you actually can go down a pretty dark path and completely avoid dating. And I have literally met people, and this is why I am so fucking open about it, because me bringing it up has made people come out of their shell and open up to me. But they have said like, oh, I got diagnosed 3 years ago and I have not gone on a single date. I've not spoken to a single guy. I am just so fucking scared. And I'm like, 3 years? And these are like, you know, beautiful women that need to get out there and flaunt it. And I'm like, that breaks my heart that there are people like that. But let's talk about that emotional feeling of being like, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to date. What did you do?
Totally felt the same way. Like, it was so overwhelming, and I just didn't want like what happened to me to happen to anyone else, especially after like I felt like I was to blame for giving it to my current like sexual partner. She got the symptoms of HSV1, except as like genital warts, and she dealt with that for like 10 days. That felt so shitty. I couldn't even think about wanting to do that with someone else, even if it was the tiniest chance. I felt like the biggest piece of garbage, and I was like, I don't deserve to date because I have this thing. Even though, who actually knows which way it's transmitted? Like, I think in my head, okay, I probably gave it to her. But it can happen at any time in life, and the symptoms of the virus just spring like that. It's activated, and in that moment, your virus is shedding its material and able to be transmitted. And that's what's really helped me get along. But the emotion at the time was like, it's all my fault. I'm a piece of shit. I don't deserve to date. Even if I did, who would want to date me because I have this thing?
It's a horrible feeling to go through that. Now, just for the audience, I'm going to recap a few things with what you said. So you just mentioned the word genital warts. And it's not genital warts because that's HPV, which is another whole episode in itself. We class them as ulcers. So when you have HSV or herpes, you class them as ulcers, and they're little ulcerated kind of wounds. And because they're open wounds, that's kind of like how it's transmitted. So we're going to go through a little bit of education. I'm going to be doing so many episodes on this to like really dig deep into what the fuck herpes is. But HSV1, as you've mentioned, you said that you were going down on your partner and then she somehow got HSV1 on her genitals. I know some people's minds are like, I don't understand, like what? HSV1 is the cold sore strain on your mouth. And you mentioned that you'd had a pimple near your mouth and maybe it didn't progress to looking like a typical cold sore. So if you're not sure and you're not aware if it's an actual cold sore, because you think in your mind a cold sore is like that motherfucking gross, crusty thing all over your face. And I mean, I'm on your mouth, sorry, not your face, but some people do unfortunately get that. But you can just get a tiny pimple that is herpes, right? And if you go down on your partner, which I mean, everyone in the fucking 21st century loves some oral sex. And honestly, I did get an STD check ages ago and she said with oral sex, because you can do like throat swabs and stuff. She's like, oh, so do you use protection with giving oral? And I looked at her and I was like, who the fuck does that? And she was like, she goes, I know. And she's like, I have to just ask anyway. I was like, no. And I was like, I'm not going to put some fucking glad wrap over my hoo-ha or something for a guy to go down on me. Like, and I'm not going to put a condom on to go down on a guy. Like, no. So, you know, that's just the world these days and it's fine. But everyone's taking that risk, right, when it comes to oral sex. But it's a fun time. So just do it. Just do it, you know. But you've obviously had this tiny pimple. You've had technically cold sores and you're unaware. And you can go through, even if you don't have an active pimple on your face or a little cold sore, you can have those prodrome symptoms you were mentioning. They're called prodrome. So it means that the virus is shedding. So if people have cold sore history and they understand cold sores, because most people do understand cold sores, right? You get a tingling feeling. That's called a prodrome symptom. You get a tingling feeling and that is giving you the like, oh, hello, you're really run down, you're stressed, your immunity level's low, and I'm tingling and I'm about to form like a cold sore. So you can get on top of it and delay actually getting a cold sore, or unfortunately, sometimes you get one. But if you've got these prodrome symptoms and you're unaware of it and you're uneducated, and then you give oral sex to a partner, they're then going to get HSV1 in their genitals. And then they're going to be a little bit unaware. And most of the time, you're going to be having unprotected sex, especially when it's a partner. And then that's when you're going to get it then on your genitals. So then you get it in both places. So that's where the confusion is for so many people. But a lot of people have cold sores. A lot of people have herpes on their face. So did you learn anything new or you know all about that now?
Oh, yeah. Like you've totally just educated me right there. Like classic Nurse Jess, like so good. Yeah, just like the learning that like the difference between like the HPV, like the warts versus the ulcers, like that was really informative even for me. So I guess, guys, like you're always learning things about your own diagnosis. Like you can keep learning. It's good to continue being up to date, and there's always things you can take from others.
Exactly. So I do actually want to do an episode on HPV because that is extremely common, and the statistics are wild with that. But that's another episode. So we're going to go back into the herpes. So stay tuned for that. So you know, HSV1, as we've said, cold sores transmit to both, all right, which is very confusing for people, but it's why that one is the most common. And I have had people that I've met before, and it's funny because I've disclosed that I've got it, and they're like, oh, yeah, I've had a cold sore once, but like it went away and I've never had it again, so I don't have herpes. And I'm like, no, you always have it. Anyway, I don't bother. But I actually have HSV2, and HSV2 is only in the genital region. Not reason, but there is small statistics that say that HSV2 can be passed orally, but it's like really unheard of. It's like crazy tiny statistics, but predominantly HSV2 is only genitals. So that's the one that I got, and that's because I had unprotected sex with somebody who was newly diagnosed with HSV2. And when you're in that new diagnosis stage, that is when you're the most, I guess, what's the right wording? Super spreader. That's when you're going to spread it the most because one, you're uneducated. You got no idea what prodrome symptoms are. You're not taking antivirals. And, you know, it's the highest level in your body of like, it's like when you get chickenpox. And this is another little Nurse Jess time. Shingles and chickenpox. It's the same family as herpes.
I just learned this as well. I was just like, no way. Like, they're all in the same family. And it's just like, chickenpox is talked about so openly, like everyone gets it. But even though 66% of the population get herpes or at least one type of herpes, it's just so taboo.
Exactly. But, if you think about it, you get predominantly chickenpox as a child and you get chickenpox once, right? And then what happens is that's a virus that's attacked your body. And then you actually forever have that virus in your body. So, for example, you go to the doctor's surgery and I can say, can I get a blood test to show my serology for chickenpox? And it'll show evidence in my bloodstream that I have had the chickenpox virus, because the chickenpox virus is forever with me now. It lives in your nerves and your spine, okay? And that's just people used to give each other chickenpox and have chickenpox parties and shit, because once you get it, it's like strengthening your immune system to not get it later in life. So what happens is later in life, if you're going to get chickenpox again, it then turns into something called shingles, which shingles is like a nasty version of chickenpox. It's still a virus, it's same family, but if somebody gets it that are older, like an elderly person, it really can affect them, and it's a horrible thing. So they've got booster shots and stuff to help with that. But that's all in the same family, because you've still had it for forever, and it's more so people that have never had chickenpox. So you kind of be grateful that you got chickenpox, right? You're like, cool, I've got that little horrible virus. It's sitting in my spine. I've got it forever now. Same thing with herpes, right? So when you get herpes, it's just another strain in the same family. And then you may get a horrible outbreak the first time, which I'll talk about my outbreak because I don't feel like you had a proper outbreak. So I'll talk about mine, but you get an outbreak and then that's usually first is the worst and then it will get better. And you really only get outbreaks when your immune system's low and you're stressed and you've got stuff going on where it's a bit of a wake-up call to be like, look after yourself. Because the people that get cold sores all over their face, lots and lots and lots are people that are so run down. Immunity levels shit. They're stressed as fuck. They need to just take some time to chill. So that's just little Nurse Jess, doing her thing again.
No, I'm loving the educational content. Keep it up. This segment's my favorite. I'm a big nerd about all this stuff and hearing all the medical terms being thrown around. So that's pretty cool. But I've had, I'd say 2 small outbreaks. I've treated both of them, very short term. But they've always been when I've just been run down. My body's been stressed, immunity's low. Exactly what Jess was saying. You hit the nail on the head. That's when it's happened. But again, for me personally, I've been predominantly asymptomatic, and everyone with herpes has their own individual experience of how much it flares up, how much does it. It's just tuned to the individual body. And just because I'm not necessarily like you are, you might have more outbreaks than me, you might have less, it doesn't change a thing. We both have this same diagnosis and we both face the same battles. And I just think that's important to remember. It doesn't make you better or worse. It just means we're all a community in this.
Okay, everybody, I'm going to interrupt the episode quickly because it's time to play 2 Truths and a Lie. I absolutely love this game. We have spoken so much about herpes, but now we're just going to, dial it back a little bit and we're going to talk about something else. And this is a chance to get to know Lochee a little bit more outside of what we've been chatting about today. So, Lochee, I would love for you to share with me your 2 truths and a lie, and I am going to try and guess what your lie is.
Oh, here we go. I'm terrible at lying, so poker face on. Alrighty. Lie or truth number 1. Could be either. First day I was in Africa, the car broke down on the way to safari and it took us 13 hours to get to the safari on my first day ever in Africa.
Okay. All right.
Can't tell. 2, about a week into being in London, I hopped in the wrong car. I had ordered an Uber and got in, and the guy blew up at me. And I got out in such a hurry. I left I don't know what I even left behind. It wasn't that important, but I left something behind there, and I was like, oh shit! And I had to call the Uber back. I didn't really have a way to do that, so I was a bit screwed.
Okay, all right. Number 3.
I recently road tripped through the States, and I camped both below sea level and over 2,000 meters above sea level in the same trip.
You are a bad liar. I already know which one it is. Number two is your lie.
I was like, oh, I'm trying to add too many like little details to the story. You got me so well.
It's so funny. It's so good. But also I follow you on Instagram. So I know that I know you've done that trip. And I also do remember you putting up a post about your African safari and being like delayed and stuff. I do have memory of that. Yeah, see, I love this. I know, and I do have a very good memory with things like this. And I'm getting better at these two truths and a lie. I am. Sometimes I get caught out, but I was like, nah, gotcha. Especially because you couldn't say that you lost your phone. And I think you were going to say phone.
Just got to go with it.
But you know why? It's because and this is like with the topic as well that we've been talking about with like disclosing and stuff. It's like you have those morals about you and you don't want to lie to people because it doesn't align with you. And so that's like, a good segue to like episode 2 that we're going to be doing together about disclosing and stuff because, yeah, you're a shit-ass liar.
What a way to turn that around. That's too good. You must have been doing this for a while or something.
Maybe. All right, everybody, we're going to get back into the episode now. I actually love that you said that it's individualized because it actually really is for so many people in terms of like outbreaks and stuff. So you mentioned 2 outbreaks. You got it in 2022. So that's like literally over 2.5 years now, which is wild. What about on your mouth? Do you get cold sores?
No, barely ever.
Yeah, see, wild. And so my outbreak, and I have heard this a lot with talking to people, HSV2 outbreaks, because it's genital as well, the outbreaks are much worse. So the very first outbreak. So most people will go to the doctor and be like, oh my fucking God. But a lot of women will think it can be a sign of like really, really bad thrush. So sometimes they'll just go to the chemist and get themselves some thrush treatment. And then maybe after, 4 to 7 days, it's actually better. So they're like, oh, just a nasty case of thrush. Or they'll think maybe it's a UTI mixed with it. A lot of women like to self-diagnose themselves as well. They love it. And, if your hoo-ha, something's going down your hoo-ha, you just automatically think it's thrush or something. So they could then have it and then not just totally be oblivious and not realize and then, carry on their life. And then maybe another thing will pop up once or twice. But that's how it spreads, right? Because then they're spreading it because they're actually unaware. My outbreaks now, and, this is vulnerable for me to share, but when I'm really run down, all I get in terms of an outbreak is 1 or 2, and I call them paper cuts because they're technically the ulcers, right? And they are so fucking tiny. And I'm talking, I have a mirror there and a light and I'm like full on trying to investigate because I can feel there's something there, but I can't physically see it because it looks like a tiny paper cut. That is how small it is. And I've dated people and I'm so open about dating and we'll talk about dating later. I'm so open about it that I did tell someone that I was sleeping with, I go, oh, I've got an outbreak. I've got my little herpes has come back. Like I joke about it and I'm like, oh, I'm run down. Little herpes is telling me that I'm run down. I really got to look after myself here. And he was curious. And so I'm all about educating. And I was like, yeah, I'll fucking show you my little herp. And so I'm like, legs open. He's got his iPhone torch and he's in between my legs. And I swear to God, he was there for like 20 minutes. He's like, I cannot see it. And I'm like trying with the mirror. I'm like, that little bit there. And then he eventually was like, that's like a tiny paper cut. That is, I can't even see that. And I was like, that's herpes. That's little herp. And then, he was so shocked at like the fact of, the visual you have in your head when it comes to herpes. You think it's like this disgusting image, right? And he was like, that is not what I thought at all. And I was like, this is the only way it impacts my life. If I pee, it just stings a bit. And I'm like, damn little herp. And then it goes away after a day or 2. And that's my outbreak. That's when I have an outbreak. That's not affecting my life at all. It's the psychological, mental side that fucks people's lives. Medically, no.
I love that. I'm going to start using that, my little herp. Like
yeah,
that's so funny. That sounds like an episode out of. Have you ever seen the show like Big Mouth?
Yes, I love Big Mouth.
Yeah, right. It's like an episode, like a sex education episode of Big Mouth. That was great.
It's just like, honestly, it's just a reminder to myself though. Like I think to myself, oh, I've got a little outbreak, and I think, oh yeah, actually, you know what? I've not been eating very well. I've not been drinking much water. My sleep's been fucked. I do feel a bit of a cold coming on. And it's actually like a reminder. Like, I'm actually like grateful for little herps sometimes. It's like a little like, come on, Jess, like, take care of yourself. Do some more self-care, some self-love days, or I'm gonna get you.
Yeah, it's an internal reminder to take care of ourselves. Like, that's kind of good.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah. We were talking the other day about how we're very grateful that we actually got our diagnosis, but we'll save that. We'll save that segment. Your symptoms. Do you want to like be vulnerable and just share like what did you feel? Did it hurt when you peed? Like what actually was your outbreak?
Oh yeah, so I actually have never had an outbreak on my genitals at all. The HSV one completely limited to like oral. So I think I've had an ulcer. My worst ulcer was sort of on the inside of my lip. And that hurt a bit. I just treated it with acyclovir. Like, that's a pretty common treatment. I don't know the brand name. You would, Jess. You'd be good at that.
I'll talk about it after. So wait, so you've only ever gotten a diagnosis of oral herpes. You've never had a diagnosis of genital herpes.
Absolutely, that's me.
Really? See, I thought you actually had a swab and like an actual positive HSV1 on your genitals.
So I think I actually it was a blood test or a urine test. It's been a while now, so I'm trying to think. But yeah, it was still present because, I mean, that virus is still active in your body and still leaves traces. It is harder to pick up on that, and the tests aren't as necessarily as accurate. So I could have had it and it could have come up negative, which happens for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But that's something we'll talk about later, I'm sure. But yeah, like I've been limited to that. And it's still something I felt like over that much. Like, I wouldn't consider I had it as bad as most people who have the genital symptoms, but it's psychologically, like, it still prevented me from getting back out there, meeting new people, and just how I felt about myself. And that's like the worst part. And I think a lot of doctors hesitate to even tell people.
Yeah, no, I agree. How was your doctor appointment like when he, told you? Did you have a pretty good positive experience? Did you leave really fucking clueless? How was your experience?
I reckon I left pretty clueless. My first thing was like, I have had an STI test. Why didn't I know about this? And they're like, well, we don't include it in the standard STI test. I was like, well, that's bullshit. Like, why not? I was a bit frustrated, and they were so nonchalant about it. I wanted to have answers and questions, and like I wanted to know about what this meant for my life. And they were pretty nonchalant. I mean, she was still pretty good. Like, I felt like I was educated, and it was like I was told that 66% of the population under 50 have like at least HSV1, or one of the two subtypes, HSV1 or HSV2. And just I got the really basic stuff. So I think most of it I had to go home and like research myself, which is when I got on to finding like your last podcast and like ended up chatting to you, which I found out was so much more like helpful and resourceful.
Yeah, I didn't feel, I wasn't judged at all by my doctor. And I know that, like, I think some people think that you get like a judgment, but like a lot of people I've spoken to, and just remember, I've spoken to a lot of fucking people about this topic, but it's never a judgment thing at all from a doctor. It's more of a very blasé, like, yeah, this is what you got. And then you're kind of asking questions, because I was like, oh my God, I was like, do I have to tell every single person I date? And they're like, nah, like, no, everyone's got it. And then I'm like, but that ethically, like, and morally doesn't sit right with me. And they're like, no, you don't have to, like, just like, if you have symptoms, just like don't have sex, and here's some antivirals and just take these. But they don't, because your mind is going a million miles an hour, right? You're thinking about all these things, and they don't have fucking time. At the same time, like, you got a diagnosis, here's your meds, piss off. They don't have time to talk to you.
No, I got the exact same talk where they just said, oh, don't even bother. It's not a big deal. Like, you don't need to tell future sexual partners. But when I've done that, and I still hold guilt for that, every time I've done that, sex isn't nearly as good. I'm thinking about it. It's gotten in the way of it. And that's something I really like to talk about at some point. But like, just like that feeling of being like, I don't know if like, I haven't really talked to a lot of other guys about it, but there's that feeling at me at least, that I'm just like, oh shit, I really wish I found a way to tell them. And that was more like earlier stages of when I had it, before I became a bit more confident with talking about it. It was really hard to sort of open up.
Yeah, which is why like I want more awareness out there, you know, like doing things like podcasting and you know, blogs and things like this, so that people are a little bit more aware of like what the fuck it is, because you do leave kind of really deflated, really scared, vulnerable, and you just have so many questions and you're like, who do I go to, right? So we're going to go into that topic now of what you mentioned, because it's really important. And a lot of people, and I want people to understand this, is you go through a very, very shameful feeling when you have this diagnosis, and it is horrifying to try and bring the conversation up to somebody, especially the first like couple of times. Like it is so scary. My heart rate goes through the roof. It is really, really scary. So sometimes what people do, and this is okay if you've done this, if you're listening to this, it is fucking okay that you've done this, because I've done this. I know Lochee's done this. It is okay. You know, if you're still practicing safe sex and you have not disclosed to that person, it doesn't mean you're a shit person, okay? It does not mean you're a shit person. It is really hard to deal with the shame and to actually have that conversation. And it depends how that first conversation goes to then how the future of you disclosing will go. And if you do have a really horrible first disclosure, then good fucking luck. You know, you're probably never going to tell anyone ever again. And I've had friends open up to me and say, Jess, you're so brave for telling guys, you know, about this before sleeping with them. And they've said to me, you know, and they've said, I'm trying to word it the nicest way possible. But they pretty much said that if they had this, they wouldn't tell the guy and they would just bury this and be like, I'm just going to pretend. And then if it pops up and they get it one day, I'll be like, oh, I didn't know I had that. And just act oblivious. Like, and I understand where they're coming from. I get it. But, you know, morally, it doesn't sit right with me. And so that's why I've kind of gone in the space of always telling people, and I always tell people. But I've met guys before that have actually, you know, met a girl out, had the shame and slept with them, and they actually really fucking liked that girl. But what they've done is they've ghosted them because they're too even more ashamed to then say it after they've slept with somebody because of the stigma, because they don't want them to turn around and be like, oh my God. So, I mean, I reckon, and we were talking about this, I reckon that's why a lot of people ghost. I actually reckon that's why so many people ghost. It's because of this shame, right?
100% agree. I think a lot of people are actually hiding that shame and will like someone and be like, they'll try and work up the courage in themselves, and they just get there and like, and they freeze and they just can't. I've actually, I got to admit, I've personally done it. I was texting a girl I liked, and I just didn't want to have the conversation, and I stopped talking, and we weren't even talking for that long, but I was like, I'm going to cut it off before it gets any better, so I don't have to have that. So yeah, I reckon it just happens all the time. It's crazy.
Honestly, because if you think about it, it's already so scary initially, but then you actually feel like a piece of shit if you've slept with that person and you really like them, and then you see them again and then they want to have sex again. If you then tell somebody after you've been sexual with them, I feel like it's a real betrayal. That's just my personal thing, right? And I would hate for them to react like that and be like, oh my God, like, how dare you? I would have never slept with you if I knew that. And it's so scary. So you ghost, you go, okay, I really like that person and we had such a great connection and the sex was amazing and I would definitely see a future with them, but I am too shamed like that I did that. So I'm just going to walk away from this. And how shit is that?
Absolutely. But I think the lesson like I've taken from that is like, you can get rejected for literally anything. I think
literally
like, we can get rejected for anything. We can get ghosted for any reason. Like, it's probably unlikely that it's going to be the herpes that does it. Like, I've watched videos of when people are like, actually, it might have been the personality, it might just not been the connection there. Well, there really was, and it just goes ahead regardless. I think that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. Like, we're rejected for so many other reasons. Why make up one that's like, and just put it out there and get in the way of yourself? Like, that's just self-sabotage.
Yeah. I know a lot of people do. And there are some really supportive like Facebook groups and stuff out there with herpes. But I've actually removed myself from all of those groups because there is a lot of negative talk and it can be very draining to read. And I have had, lots of comments that come up with people and they're like, oh, I got rejected for this reason, blah, blah, blah. It's because of my herpes. And people need to understand that like, we are rejected for so many other things. And like, just because you've told someone you've got herpes and they're like not they don't want to pursue anything with you, it's not just the herpes, right? It's just that maybe they just didn't even have that vibe with you in the first place. So it's just kind of like, it's just in the too hard basket. But like people then think and make their whole reason why people don't love them and don't like them, the whole reason is just the herpes. And it's like, no, actually, maybe you're just in a really fucking bad headspace and they just don't want to be around you vibe, to be quite honest.
Absolutely. Like you can get in your head about one insecurity and make it all about that. But like we're humans, we're multifaceted. We've got so much more to us than some silly diagnosis that's like 2/3 of the world already has. Not that big a deal.
Yeah. We're actually doing an episode after this, guys, as well, which is really exciting. And we're going to be talking about disclosing to people, and how to have safe sex and how to kind of navigate that whole world, because that itself is such a big topic. And, we've already covered so many things here, but the one thing we haven't covered is like full statistics. And these statistics, and this is, I would have sent this to you because I send this article to fucking everybody, and I'm going to put it in the show notes. It's the best article ever. Here are the stats, right? HSV to females with having sex with someone that has herpes. There's a 10% chance. So for me to give it to a guy, 10% chance if I'm asymptomatic with no protection. So, it's a bit of a chunk there, and because females have like more of like an area, you know what I mean? Because there's like a lot of juices and shit down there. So no protection, and then 5% if it's condoms or antivirals, or 2.5% condoms, and then you also take some antivirals. So 2.5% is very, very low, very, very low. When you do HSV from a male to give it to a female, it's only 4% no protection. Right? Wow. 2% condoms or meds, right? And that's either taking antivirals or wearing a rubber, or 1% if you do condoms and you take antiviral medication. 1. And then this is the game changer, right? There is a 2 to 15% chance of an unintended pregnancy when you use a condom alone. 2 to 15% chance. So do people think about that every fucking time? There's way more chance of a pregnancy.
Wow. That's, I didn't know those stats. Like, blowing my mind. Holy shit.
Oh, no. Ready? This will blow your mind. That wasn't even the juicy bit, right? There's a 1.8% chance of dying in a car accident over your lifetime. 1.8%. And for you to give it to a female with no symptoms, condoms, and some antivirals, you're 1% chance of giving HSV to that girl.
Look at
that. Boom, mic drop. I can't drop my mic though because you won't hear me.
You've been educated.
Yeah.
And this is brought to you by Nurse Jess.
Yes. Da-da-da. It's a really good article. It's so good, and I've sent it to a bazillion people. I've sent it to guys I'm dating. And then the other video that we both fucking love, we froth it, is Ella Dawson. TED Talk. She does a TED Talk about herpes. Tell me about it, Lochee. You love it.
So good. Guys, I actually watched this as like a pump up for this video. I would recommend it to anyone. If you're searching for it on YouTube, it's a TED Talk by Ella Dawson, and it's called STIs Aren't a Consequence, They're Inevitable. And like that title in itself, so powerful. And this is a girl who is opening up about her experience with HSV1 in her 20s, who has genital ulcers as her symptoms. And she got it on her 21st birthday. Like, imagine that. Of all the presents you could get on your 21st, that's what she got. And she just, like, the confidence and the way she goes about it, she's like, I could handle this issue in one of two ways. I could laugh at myself and pity myself and feel bad in all these ways. Or I could realize that it is a natural part of being human and existing in a place where we love to have relationships with other people. And that really, every time I watch it, it strikes me. I've watched it twice this week. I watched it when Jess sent it to me for the first time. It was like one of the best things she could have sent me. It actually changed my life. I'd recommend it to anyone who wants. It's just some inspiration, because that was really powerful.
It is very powerful, and it's not even a very long. It's less than 20 minutes. Like, it's a less than 20 minute video. 16 That's right. 16 minutes. And it can really shift your perspective. And if you're feeling in that really dark negative place that we spoke about, like, watch that video and I swear to God, you'll feel the weight come off your shoulders and you'll be like, okay.
Well, one of the funniest things she says, she went on a trip to Vegas and she talks about this in the video and she goes, I won't spoil any more than this for you guys, but she goes, oh yeah, recently went to Vegas and one of the jokes I like to make to bartenders is that, oh, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, except herpes. But I'm actually fine because I already have herpes. And she's like, right. Yeah, I've scored lots of free drinks, like doing it. But I was like, that's awesome.
Oh, I do remember that part of the video, actually. It's gold as well. And there's actually all these funny memes about that when it was like, yeah, what stays in Vegas? Or like, what did you get from your last relationship? Or like, there's all these like funny memes about herpes. And it's like, unfortunately, you always have that. And it's like, yeah, unfortunately you do. But I mean, do people make the same joke about being like, oh yeah, I've always got the chickenpox virus now because when I was 7, I got chickenpox. Same fucking thing.
Well, what I got from my last childhood brought, chickenpox with me. Like, it's not that big a deal.
Wait, I'm going to bring out, now the audio listeners won't know what's going on, but we're going to talk about what's in my hand. Oh my God. What can you see in my hand, Lochee?
I see a fantastic herpes mug. And that's not a mug with herpes. That's a mug that says, I have herpes and don't steal my cup.
So I got these cups created and they're fucking gold, eh? And it says, yeah, I have herpes, ... don't steal my cup. And then on the back it says, oh, really podcast, which is awesome. But it's just so funny because it's like, yeah, like one, if you steal my fucking mug, you're going to get some herpes. Little do they know I don't have cold sore herpes. I've got it down my hoo-ha. But the thing is, it's like, I wanted to just bring up the conversation, and have people react to that mug. And I think it's going to be super powerful. And I'm starting to take it out with me to places and just open the conversation of cold sores, because if people normalize cold sores, so why can't we normalize, downstairs ones too? Because it's the same fucking thing.
Have you thought about taking it to like the bars and the clubs and just pulling it out? Pull me, guys.
I mean, a mug feels a bit weird in a bar. But you know what? I am a nurse and I feel like in the nurses' tea rooms, they're going to froth this. They're going to love it because nurses in general are very open people. And I think that is like another reason why I'm so open. It's like, yes, it's my personality. It's been my way of actually, I guess, like getting through my diagnosis by making it like my vulnerability is my super strength, right? But yeah, nurses in general, like they're just so good and so open and honest about this stuff, and I feel like they're going to froth it. So yeah, I'm going to do that in the hospitals and open conversations. Yeah, it's my plan.
Hell yeah, send one my way.
Yeah, no, all the way in Canada though. Fucking hell, Lochee.
I'll pay the postage fee.
Yeah, well maybe when you just come back to Brisbane, I'll save you on.
Yeah, that's better. We'll do that.
So good. Well, guys, we're going to finish the episode now because we are going to be taping our next episode, which is all about disclosure, because that is already such a hot topic in itself. And I think it's really awesome to hear a guy's perspective. I'll share what I do as well as part of the whole herpes series that I'm doing. It's going to be great. So definitely, give us a 5-star review after this because, it's gold, right? And then listen to the next one. All right. So say bye, Lochee, and then you will see you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye, guys. See you soon.